Hey, I'm about to share the interview I did with Kristen Doute of the Valley and Vanderpump Rules. She was super candid. She talked about a recent cosmetic procedure she had to permanently eliminate fat around her tummy, and there's only 48 hours of downtime, so we get into that. She also talks about the latest with Jax and Brittany, her journey to motherhood, and so much more. I hope you listen and love. Kristen, I have been watching Vanderpump, The Valley, it all. So, I'm so excited to meet you as a fan, but also I was saying, I know that you are honest in the best way. This is so on brand for you, and I think it's so cool that you're opening up the conversation, and owning your age and owning where you're at.
Yeah.
And so I had to come in, give you props for that, but also I have some good questions for you.
Thank you. No, for sure. Like throw them at me. But yes, I agree. I'm like, I don't understand. I do understand the stigma around like cosmetic procedures. I get it. But for me personally, I have to be transparent with everybody and be open and honest because that's what I want to see as well.
Okay, so then let's start with the ear sculpt, getting into it because you have been open and honest about it. I
Yeah.
was curious if you were telling a friend who was considering it, like what would you tell them if somebody's like, should I try it? Like what was the best part what would you tell if I was your friend and I was like wondering?
Okay, I've had like I can't tell you how many of these conversations already in real life. So it's happened like my sister, my best friends back home, friends on the valley, friends in LA. So the very first thing that I say, because it's the most mind-blowing part to me, is that what I learned when I first got to the AirSculpt offices, like pre-procedure, is that after the age of 14, we do not regenerate new fat cells, which blew my mind. So when they say it's like a one-time procedure, it's because they're extracting the fat cells. They do not come back. So that to me was like, I'm sorry, what? No one ever told me this before. I had no clue. And that is why I knew that it could be a one-time thing. But the part that made me really want to do air sculpt was that I was not going under anesthesia, that it was a fairly quick procedure, but that the downtime was so fast. And it absolutely matched up to everything that I was told. I mean, I flew into Miami. My best friend Zach on the Valley, he flew with me, so he was like my moral support, my emotional support, Zach. And it was like from the moment we walked in to the Air Sculpt offices, and everyone was so kind and warm and inviting. It was like I was here with excitement, like super excited and like pretty anxious, and my anxiety completely depleted at that point. So it was like the pre-procedure, just feeling like my two nurses were like my new best friends, prepping me for everything. There was nothing that I didn't know going into it. So that's why I felt really calm as well. But then during the procedure, it was just like playing music and chatting with my doctor, my nurses. Zach was there with me the whole entire time. And it was about an hour and a half. I think I said that, but like about an hour and a half. And then we were done. And when I went to post-procedure, it was just checking my vitals, giving me fluids, of course, the important things nurses do. But for me, it was like the aftercare of helping me put my garment. You do wear a compression garment, or I did for 2 weeks, but putting me in my garment, showing me how to do the garment, and then walking me through all of my own aftercare. And it was so embedded in my brain that like I wasn't nervous at all, that I wouldn't be able to. I don't know. I'm just a very nervous Nelly. So I felt so confident about it all. And then Zach and I walked to the Uber, went home, went to the hotel and had lunch. We watched movies, we hung out, and then flew back to LA 2 days later.
Oh,
And with
wow.
week, I was flying to Lexington Comic-Con doing press for 3 days straight. And then we had the Valley premiere party.
Okay, very cool. So you did it on your tummy area. You've also talked about that you were interested in wanting to start a family. So I was
Yeah.
curious, does this impact that? And also, I do want to know, where are you in the process of potentially starting a family?
Yeah. So great question, because it was my very first question for Dr. Rollins, who is my Air Sculpt doctor, who's also the founder of Air Sculpt. But when we did our virtual consultation, my very first question was, we're trying to get pregnant. Is this going to affect me, post Air Sculpt? Is that going to affect my pregnancy at all? And he said, no, not at all. Feel free to talk to your OB. I did. My OB knew exactly what Air Sculpt was, said not an issue whatsoever. So that made me of course, elated. And Luke and I are still actively trying. You know, we were really lucky and fortunate. We got pregnant last year. We had a loss, but we've jumped back on the trip. We took a few months off to just sort of heal our minds and our souls, but we're actively trying. So fingers crossed.
That's really exciting. Okay, well, fingers crossed.
Thank you.
I was also curious in terms of being on Vanderpump Rules and the Valley, who do you, when the cameras are not rolling, like who are you still tight with? Who do you go to dinner with?
On the Valley, with Brittany and Jax, of course, 24/7. Jax and I have actually become a lot closer since he and Brittany have had like issues. So I like that he's reaching out to me for sort of moral support, help, things like that, to hang out. He and Luke have gotten a little bit closer as well, which is wonderful.
Wow.
Nia and Danny, as I say on the Valley, like I'm just obsessed with the two of them. I think their couple goals, their family goals. Luke and I really look up to them a lot. And that's something that I value in friendships, are people that I look up to. People that I like to, you know, sort of mold my life very similar to theirs. So I love them. And on Vanderpump, Sheena, I love Sheena to pieces. She just bought a house in the Valley. Luke was helping Brock with their little walkway area, and Sheena, Summer, and I were watching movies at the new house. That was so fun. So love Sheena and Brock to death. Katie lives down the hall from me. I was just hanging out with her the other day. And of course, Ariana. Ariana's my girl. Schwartz.
That's awesome.
Schwartz will always be, you know, one of the loves of my life. He's just the best.
So it sounds like Luke is now in the Valley with you.
Yeah. So Luke will probably always have his property in Colorado. He has a 70-acre ranch in Colorado. He's in Colorado right now, but he'll be back here this weekend. So he's mostly in California with me, but he goes back to Colorado for like weeks at a time. We're hoping to spend like a month there.
Oh, cool.
Fingers crossed, coming up soon.
I was going to say, I'm also glad to hear, because I sometimes know, you know, when relationships get stickier, there's a separation. It could kind of be like choose one side or the other. And it sounds like everyone's really cool about you navigating both sides. I was curious, maybe you even have tips for like when you have a close friend group and there's an issue, how you're able to maintain relationships with both sides. Unless you're like, no, I'm team one versus team other.
Girl, I have learned, like, especially throughout being on Vanderpump and my time on that show, which sounds so weird because those are my real friendships. But like the one thing I learned is like, do not insert yourself in someone else's marriage or relationship. I just want to be a sounding board. I'm here to listen. And that's a valuable lesson my older sister taught me through one of my breakups. Was she would call me and say, do you want me to listen or do you want advice? Because I'm not going to give you unsolicited advice, even my own family. So that's the approach that I take now, which I wish I had taken years ago on Vanderpump Rules, you know, Katie and other relationships that I love to just throw myself right into the middle of. But as I've gotten older, it's really just like, I'm here to listen. If you want advice, I'll give you my 2 cents, but otherwise I'm just here to listen. And, you know, Brittany and Jax, they're not just a couple. I mean, they're married, they have a child. That's a family unit. So Brittany is not asking anyone to, you know, quote, like hate Jax or not be around Jax. And I think it can only be helpful because I have high hopes for them. I don't know where their relationship is going to lead. I hope that it's not irreparable, but I just have high hopes that Jax can get it together.
I love to hear that. I mean, words of wisdom. It shows how much you've evolved, truly. And I want to get into a little behind the scenes because we see you doing, you know, the confessional interviews on the show. Are those like one take, or how many takes, or how many drinks are people having? Can you share it? Spill any tea on that?
Yeah. So the interview bites, it's strange from show to show and also like year to year how that changes. When I did the GOAT, for example, like the new competition show I have coming out, that was the first time I've done something what they call OTF, which means on the fly. So you're filming and you immediately jump into interviews. Like wherever they set the cameras up, they just set them up and you're reacting in real time, which was so new and different for me. With Vanderpump and now the Valley, we're talking about things that happened last summer. Like we're about to be wrapped on interviews right now.
Oh, wow.
Like next couple of weeks, because we did film sort of like an epilogue. And I think Brittany and I have both been a little transparent about that, where Jax and Brittany, because of their split, producers wanted to pull cameras back up to like talk about it in real time. But we're still talking about things that happened over the summer. So that can be like a little weird and difficult at times, because you're like, I mean, I feel differently, than I felt back then. But it's really, you don't get to see the footage. So you're just sitting there with a producer having the conversations, and they will remind you like, well, you said this. So how do you feel about when you said this? Or how did that day go for you? So you're just kind of reliving the moments and just kind of chatting.
That could take a lot on your mental health. So like if you see people talking about you in their confessionals or just having to relive moments, do you have any tips? Like what do you do to manage your mental health so you stay in a good place?
You watch it once and don't watch it again, and don't go read all the comments. You just have to know it. At the end of the day, a reality show is authentically the reality of what's happening, but there's also a story to tell. So every second is not going to be put on TV. They have 40 something minutes to place everything that we filmed. But I'm not going to lie. It was easier on Vanderpump to watch the interview bites from the friends than it is on the Valley.
So speaking of interview bites, I have two last questions. One is in terms of public speaking. I'm sure you've been media trained and all that. For a lot of people that get nervous in front of the cameras or doing public speaking, do you have any tips for them? And then the second thing I want to leave on is kind of like, what can we expect out of the GOAT and your new show? Like any kind of little teases for us that we can take with it.
So I don't think I've ever had media training. I'm actually thinking back to all the years, like, did they ever stick us in media training? We've definitely had like diversity type training since everything, since the pandemic and things like that. And being kind in a workplace. I think we've all done that in all walks of life, right? But media training, no, I just think for me, I just have to be authentically who I am and speak my truth. And I also lead with kindness, because it's not helpful to be rude or unkind or hurtful. It's like, I just try to, what is the golden rule? Like we were all taught by our parents, like if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Oh, I say it to my kids all day long.
Right. And it's like, there is a way to explain how you feel about someone who's not your cup of tea without being hurtful. So that's what I really try to do. Like you can add a little sass, but being unkind can really get to someone, and you don't know what other people's days are like. The person behind you in the line at Starbucks who's like grumbling about something, like you have no idea what their day started like or what their family and their situation is. So I just think you really just have to be kind to everyone. And that's just what I try to do. And then what was the question about the GOAT? Sorry.
With the GOAT. No, like what can you give us a tease of any sort of things that we could kind of know so we can get tell us.
It's going to be so much fun. So the creator of the GOAT is this amazing, brilliant mind, Lee Eisenberg. He did Jury Duty on Amazon, which is literally my favorite shows. He also did Lessons in Chemistry. He's become a really good friend since I met him doing the GOAT. We have Along Gale, who is like the head honcho of all the Bachelor franchise for many years, Bill Dixon. We're all the creators of this show. And I had never in a million years thought I would do a competition reality show. I didn't even know what to expect. I've watched competition shows, of course, but I don't know that mindset. So right before I went on the GOAT, I called a good friend of mine. His name's Dan Giesling. A lot of people consider him the GOAT of Big Brother. And we grew up together, like since junior high. So I called him and just said, like, what do I even do? And, there was some advice given, but it all went out the door the second I walked into the mansion. When I walked in, I had no idea who to expect to see, but I saw Jill Zarin and Reza, both Bravo, and that made me so happy. I fangirled over Tech from The Real World Hawaii. Blew my mind because that's my reality TV that I grew up on at my age.
Mm-hmm.
But I made some amazing friends. I think we were all such a family. I'd never lived in a house with a bunch of strangers before. but it's essentially kind of like a backyard survivor. It's going to be very light, really, really funny. But there's still a little bit of drama, Kristen, that got thrown in that mix for sure.
Amazing. We can't wait to watch it. Thank you so much for being so honest, sharing your time and your experience so that we can all feel more comfortable having these conversations that are often sometimes, behind the scenes. It's like, oh, I think she got that and nobody talks about it. So
I totally
thank you.
Yeah.